My friends, as we speak, a major crisis is taking place in Central Africa. Yes, a nation of 13 million inhabitants is bullying one, with a population of over 100 million. Intense fighting is taking place in the northeast of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, commonly shortened to DRC. Since March 2022, the Tutsi-dominated M23 rebels left Uganda and took control of 5,000 square kilometers. The city of Sake and the regional capital of Goma are now both in operational encirclement. In order to avoid a pitched battle in urban warfare, the M23 rebels have launched a new offensive, this time towards the north, where they have captured several settlements. Despite a significant numerical advantage, Congolese troops seem unable to stop enemy forces. Some seem to avoid fighting altogether.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Same thing for local UN peacekeepers. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure you don't need 10 guys to operate one mortar. These military setbacks of the DRC have caused a major humanitarian crisis. On the 7th of March, TV5 reported, DRC, the M23 rebellion is gaining ground, populations are fleeing. The tragedy of this entire story is that the ones that were once persecuted have now become the persecutors. The UN estimated that 2.5 million civilians out of 8 million were forced to flee from their homes, and hundreds of thousands are now trapped in refugee camps in the encircled Goma. Now, we could be talking of just another African civil war. The big drama is that the fighters of the M23 movement are equipped with the latest combat gear from the West and act as a modern military force. Everything points towards the foreign interference of Rwanda to support the rebels due to ethno-linguistic ties, but also for economic reasons.
I love gold!
Even worse, Rwanda is directly involved in the fighting taking place in North Kivu, as the country sends some of its battalions across the border to fight Congolese troops and help the rebels. In response, the president of the DRC, Félix Tshisekedi, said the following.
À la moindre escarmouche, lisez sur mes lèvres. Je vais réunir les deux chambres en congrès, comme me le recommande la Constitution, et je vais leur demander l'autorisation de déclarer la guerre au Rwanda. Je le dis et je pèse mes mots, parce que je suis même prêt à cela.
And his call for patriotic volunteers has led thousands of Congolese men to take up arms for what they perceive to be as a foreign invasion. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the wars in Africa. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my videos have been targeted with limited or no ads, so make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. Now, I will give you an outsider's perspective of what's happening there. I promise you I'm not a Rwandan or Congolese, although everyone needs some international riz. Of course, Ozali Kitoko, and how could we forget Gusomana Urukundo. Now, I won't bore you with a 30-minute history lesson of what happened in the region in the past 1,000 years. However, you still need some background and context for the current crisis. Long story short, inter-ethnic violence in Rwanda between 1959 and 1994 led to significant bloodshed. Hundreds of thousands of ethnic Tutsis were forced to flee and become refugees in neighboring countries. Some eventually returned, but many stayed in their host countries. Now, because of this diaspora, Rwanda now considers areas of eastern Congo as part of its sphere of influence, especially the North Kivu province. Over the years, this led to multiple Rwandan military interventions directly into the DRC, namely the First and Second Congo Wars. In regards to present times, the M23 rebels operating in this region claim to defend the interests of the oppressed Congolese Tutsi and Kinyarwanda-speaking minorities. Meanwhile, the DRC is defending the territorial integrity of its borders. This crisis has led many Congolese to demand the immediate departure of all ethnic Tutsis, as they consider them to be foreign agents. There's another reason why Rwanda is so interested in this region. However, no spoilers, I will tell you in a moment. It all started in 2012, when the first M23 rebellion broke out. Despite some initial success, eventually they got crushed. After signing a peace agreement in 2013, the military commander of the March 23 movement, Colonel Sultani Makenga, went to live in the Ugandan capital of Kampala. In 2017, he returned to the Congolese hinterlands with about 200 men. Makenga and his small army established a new base on Mount Sabinyo. For the Congolese army, it was nearly impossible to find the rebels that were hidden deep inside the mountainous jungle. This article is clear when it states, DR Congo, why is the Congolese army unable to repel the M23 attacks? In summary, they face major structural problems in the chain of command. For example, during military operations, there is often confusing overlap regarding command and control. This makes logistics a mess, aggravated by the huge landmass of the DRC. We're talking over 2,000 kilometers from the capital Kinshasa to North Kivu. Then, of course, there's a lot of corruption, with seemingly wages being paid to ghost soldiers. For example, we report a battalion, which theoretically includes between 600 and 900 soldiers on average, but on the ground, only 300 people fight within this battalion. To compensate for these shortcomings, the DRC has been relying a lot on local militias called the Mai Mai. They prove to be more motivated to fight than the Congolese Armed Forces, but they are also highly undisciplined, as they pillage and are prone to committing atrocities on civilian populations. To help bring back peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in 1999, the UN deployed a large contingent of military personnel nicknamed MONUSCO. It's a French acronym that stands for Mission de l'Organisation des Nations Unies pour la Stabilisation en République démocratique du Congo. I don't know, MONUSCO to me sounds like a very nasty disease. Something you would catch in dodgy parts of town. Jokes aside, nowadays the main task of the MONUSCO force is the troublesome situation in the northeast of the Congo. As of October 2017, the total strength of these UN peacekeeping troops amounted to over 18,000. On the 7th of December 2017, 14 UN peacekeepers were KIA and another 53 were wounded in an Islamist attack near the town of Beni. Peace could slowly flourish back in North Kivu. But not for long! After years of hibernation, on the 27th of March 2022, M23 rebels went back on the offensive. The first battle erupted on the border town of Bunagana. The surprise attack pushed local detachments of the armed forces of the DRC to withdraw, despite their heavy weapons and armored vehicles. On the 23rd of June 2022, Politico wrote, Rwanda and Uganda served as rear operating bases for M23. A couple weeks later, Canadian newspaper Le Devoir reported, UN confirms attacks by Rwandan army in Democratic Republic of Congo. According to eyewitnesses, some Ugandan soldiers allowed heavily armed M23 rebels across the border to attack Bunagana. Essentially, it was a battalion-sized unit of 500 men that stormed the city, while other equally sized columns pushed deep inside the countryside. That's how a detachment of about 900 to 1,000 rebels was spotted in Matebe, thus cutting off the RN2 road linking Rugari and Kimbumba. According to captured rebels, the next phase of the plan was to capture the towns of Rutshuru and Rumangabo. On top of the obvious value of these cities from a military perspective, it's important to note that the region of Rutshuru is inhabited by Kinyarwanda people, which have close ethno-linguistic ties to Rwanda. So we have every reason to believe that the Banyarwanda locals would be more inclined to support the M23 rebels in their campaign. Contrary to M23 formations of the past, this time rebel fighters moved in an extremely organized manner, wearing standardized military clothing and equipment, which many quickly pointed out as being the same gear being used by the Rwandan Defense Forces. Surprise, surprise, during the summer of 2022, rumors mentioned that about 300 Rwandan military personnel directly participated in military operations on Congolese soil. These claims were more or less confirmed on October 7th, with the capture of a Rwandan soldier belonging to the 401st Battalion. 3 weeks after this embarrassing incident, the DRC expulsed the ambassador of Rwanda. Meanwhile, Congolese columns were sent forward to stop the rebels, but the lack of coordination between units simply increased the number of casualties without any territorial gains. The quick succession of setbacks also affected the morale of DRC military formations. On this very interesting map, you can see how over the summer of 2022, the bulk of the fighting took place near Rutshuru. By November 1st, M23 detachments finally captured the town, and this broke the deadlock. This allowed rebel columns to push south along the NR2 road. That's when they captured Rumangabo and its important military base. Meanwhile, other detachments rushed westwards and cut across the jungle towards Mwezo and Kichanga. Overwhelmed by this blitzkrieg, the Congolese troops were unable to stop the enemy, who always seemed to be one step ahead. Here you can see pictures of a small column of Congolese soldiers patrolling the highlands of North Kivu. What do you think they can achieve on their own if they end up facing an enemy company? The Congolese army also lacked armored vehicles. In order to deploy their troops, they used these modified Toyota trucks that can seat 5 men on each side. But you can imagine the number of potential casualties if there's any type of explosion next to them. As you can see on this 3D map, the western side of the front is composed of a sea of hills, literally one after the other. In this video, you can see a 60-man strong M23 unit that built a base on this hilltop. Even deep inside the DRC, soldiers are digging trenches with mighty shovels. However, the bright tents make them very easy to spot for the Congolese drone operators. That's when Sukhoi fighter aircraft arrived to release their loads on the rebels, destroying much of the base in the process. At the end of the footage, we can see a group of roughly 20 to 25 fighters running away. Eventually, Congolese troops captured the hilltop and reported 40 enemies KIA. It's hard to say if that's true. All we know is that they did capture some wounded rebels, plus some heavy equipment like this machine gun, this RPG, and these 2 mortars. On the 6th of February 2023, Human Rights Watch reported DR Congo, atrocities by Rwandan-backed M23 rebels. Essentially, anyone living in conquered territories that was not ethnic Tutsi was forced to choose between a coffin or exile. By the 29th of March, M23 fighters had once again expanded their territorial control. The western front line stood somewhere between Mwezo, Rubaya, and Sake, and in the north, it ran across up until the Ugandan border, near the town of Nyamilima. Now, after all this foreplay, are you ready for the controversial statements? You see, on this map of the east of the DRC, you will notice that North Kivu is covered in mines, mainly illegal ones, and lots of gold can be found, mostly in the north and the west of the province. There's also tremendous tin, tungsten, and coltan. This last one, coltan, is a mineral required to build cell phones, and this coltan can be found in the mines of Rubaya, which, as we saw earlier, just came under M23 control. Check out this article from 2013. M23 rebels making millions through gold smuggling from eastern Congo. I quote, M23 attempted to sell gold originating from mines controlled by M23 allies in Walikale and Ituri. As you can see, M23 leaders were involved one way or another in gold trafficking. Fast forward to 2023 with the Financial Times. DRC says Rwandan mineral smuggling cost them almost $1 billion a year. In this article, we learned that 90% of the DRC's gold was smuggled to neighboring countries, mainly Rwanda and Uganda, where it is refined and exported internationally. And you know who loves gold? Absolutely everyone! In an interview, French expert Thierry Vircoulon said, and if there's smuggling, by definition, it is based on corruption, particularly of the Congolese army. Congolese nationals sell these minerals to Rwandans. So whoever controls the resources and the border gets the monopoly on this minerals trade. In October 2023, peace talks between M23 rebels and Kinshasa broke down, and on the 20th of December, the Democratic Republic of the Congo held elections. That's when Al Jazeera wrote, "Could DR Congo's Tshisekedi declare war on Rwanda if re-elected?" 10 days later, Félix Tshisekedi was officially elected president of the DRC with 73% of the votes. President Tshisekedi has often exacerbated national sentiment and called for volunteers. That's how thousands of young men nicknamed the Wazalendo, or Patriots, have joined some of the 100 Mai Mai self-defense groups of the country. For example, these Wazalendo claim to have liberated the village of Kichanga on the Rwan in October 2023. Now, what makes the situation confusing is that Rwanda is also meddling in the internal affairs of Burundi by supporting cross-border raids of rebels. For your information, Burundi and Rwanda are also very close from an ethno-linguistic perspective. And that's how in early 2024, a UN report revealed that Burundi covertly deployed more than 1,000 troops to the eastern Congo. On the 17th of January, tensions once again increased between the DRC and Rwanda. Le Monde reported that the Rwandan troops fired at a Congolese patrol that had unknowingly crossed the border. In this firefight, one Congolese soldier was KIA and 2 others were arrested. Now, what was extremely confusing for me was that shortly after that incident, despite the increase of violence, the DRC demanded the withdrawal of the remaining 13,500 soldiers and 2,000 policemen of the MONUSCO force. As a reminder, in the last 25 years, 270 peacekeepers fell in combat in the northeast of the DRC. If anything, the DRC would want them to stay. The Congolese Armed Forces counterattacked in mid-January when 2 M23 rebel commanders were KIA in drone strikes. The DRC was confident in their aerial superiority when in early February, a Congolese fighter aircraft was targeted by a Rwandan surface-to-air missile. According to French secret services, they spotted a Chinese-made WZ-551 armored vehicle equipped with radar and anti-air capabilities somewhere 70 kilometers north of Goma. If we look at a map, this means the anti-air missile could have been fired somewhere around Rutshuru. But now the big drama is that this vehicle belonged to the Rwandan Defense Forces. Everyone was like,
"What are you doing here?"
And then a couple days later, another Rwandan soldier was captured. Here's what he had to say.
Mu rugo ni mu Rwanda, navukiye ahantu bita i Kayonza, mfite imyaka 22, ninjiye mu gisirikare cy'u Rwanda 2022.
We learned that he completed military training in early 2024, and 2 days later he was sent with his unit across the border to support M23 rebels. He explains that his unit suffered significant losses in an artillery shelling of their position. That's when he ran away and got caught by the armed forces of the DRC. The Congolese claim to have captured 63 Rwandan soldiers, but we only have evidence of one dude. Regardless, the direct involvement of Rwandan regular forces is undeniable. We can believe entire battalions of Rwandan soldiers are sent to the Congo and then rotated out after X amount of time. Now, what's awkward is that many Rwandan troops were trained by US military personnel, where they teach them the latest squad-level battle tactics. As a matter of fact, even Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame, spent a good amount of time being trained in the United States. In this drone footage, we see another M23 camp located on a hilltop. The Congolese drone is guiding MRLS artillery fire on the rebel positions. Now the focus is this frame where we see a rebel mortar team. The moment you zoom in, you can see that they are in full Rwandan military gear. And this could be part of the overall Rwandan maskirovka. We don't know if these troops are M23 rebels, Congolese-born Tutsi volunteers, or even Rwandan soldiers. We can believe Rwandan military support allowed M23 rebels to capture the town of Shasha on the 4th of February 2024, thus cutting off the road linking Minova, Sake, and Goma. Due to the collapse of positions of the armed forces of the DRC, a couple more settlements around Lake Kivu fell into the hands of the enemy. Goma and its 1 million population was now in an operational encirclement. As a follow-up, on the 7th of February, M23 detachments now tightened the pressure on Sake. Now you might be wondering why they're not storming the towns outright. The first reason is the high attrition cost of urban warfare. Even tactical inept Congolese forces can inflict significant damage, especially if they're surrounded with their backs against a wall. It is estimated that there are between 4,000 and 5,000 men at arms in the ranks of the M23 movement. On top of that, we can add another 1,000 Rwandan soldiers for a maximum of 6,000 fighters. In front of them, the Congolese army can muster about 11,000 to 15,000 troops. So battle attrition will definitely favor Congolese forces, on top of their population advantage where they can easily replace casualties. Reason number 2 is for historical reasons. The M23 movement actually captured Goma during their first rebellion in 2012. The fall of such a big city caused an international crisis, so the UN created an offensive brigade to dislodge the M23 rebels. 3,000 peacekeepers from South Africa, Tanzania, and Malawi directly intervened and supported the armed forces of the DRC to chase the rebels out of the country. So today in 2024, Rwandan and M23 strategists don't want such a scenario to happen again. On top of that, Goma is filled with an extremely hostile population, so it would be nearly impossible to secure with only a couple thousands of soldiers. On this map by HistoryLegends, you can see where all the fighting took place since September 2023. Bright red is October, dark red November. Then we notice how starting January with the color brown, fighting shifted towards Mwezo and especially around Sake. And by February, it reached the south of Sake, thus confirming the claims that Sake and Goma are now encircled. Many are certain that the fall of these two cities could lead to the political downfall of Felix Tshisekedi, because he promised during his election campaign that the M23 rebellion would never set foot in these cities. 19th of February from Reuters, DRC conflict, why is fighting intensifying and can it threaten regional stability? Essentially, the United States are increasingly getting worried of an open conflict between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. The international situation became even more confusing when news came out of 240 Burundian soldiers being sent to prison for refusing combat deployments in Congo. On March 1st, 2024, after a 25-year presence, the United Nations started pulling out their peacekeepers from the region. At the same time, the armed forces of the DRC reported in an official communique that Rwanda had deployed an entire battalion of 500 special forces in the vicinity of Chansu. Once again, diplomatic efforts to halt the fighting failed, because Congolese President Tshisekedi does not want to negotiate with the M23 rebels. The DRC feels that Rwanda is the puppet master behind this entire conflict. Most of the members of the rebellions are ethno-linguistic Rwandans, and that's why he wants to talk directly with Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. To make matters even worse, on the 3rd of March, it was now Burundi's turn to accuse Rwanda of supporting rebel groups infiltrating their border. The latest battle reports are not glorious for the DRC. The Congolese army simply shelled positions held by the M23 rebels, but did not manage to dislodge any of enemy units. Meanwhile, M23 officers were bragging that they hold all the heights around Sake. As the rebels were besieging Sake and Goma to the south, on the 7th of March, they launched a new offensive northwards. Le Monde reported, extending its hold in North Kivu, the M23, supported by the Rwandan army, took control of the town of Nyanzale. Meanwhile, other detachments are pushing towards Lake Edward. In the end, the systemic, structural, and organizational problems of the armed forces of the DRC means they will be unable to stop the M23 offensive on their own. And fixing these organizational issues will take months, at least. On the 12th of February, the South African military agreed to deploy as many as 2,900 troops to the Congo. However, just like Burundian troops, they have not gone on the offensive yet. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The link is in the description below.